What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Hopefully you had a stress-free, Packer-free Sunday where you got to enjoy some football or sports. If you're a Wisconsin sports fan, nice wins for Marquette, the Badgers, rough loss for the Bucks, but that's another topic for another podcast. Let's talk about some Green Bay Packers. My main topic today is going to be Jordan Love. More on that in just a moment. Before we get there, let's go over a couple of the Sunday results. Let's also talk a little bit about a Packer that was released that had an impressive performance. Let's start with those results. If you listened to my show yesterday, I went through, if you're still holding on to some form of hope that the Packers could make the postseason this year, I went through all the different scenarios. Overall, Sunday was a pretty darn good day. Now, I mentioned there were some 49ers losing out scenarios that were kind of fun. That got the kibosh, but if Brock Purdy's going to continue to play that well and that defense is just beyond insane, they were never going to lose out anyway. So it does give Green Bay a few less outs with the 49ers winning that game and not giving them an avenue to lose the remainder of their games. But like I said, I don't think that was ever super realistic anyway. More importantly, as I mentioned yesterday, Green Bay needs to finish first or second between the Commanders, the Giants, the Seahawks, and the Packers. So those four teams, Green Bay needs to finish first or second. If they finish first, they'll get the 6th seed. If they finish second, they'll get the 7th seed. Anything else doesn't matter. So the great news, if you're hoping for a playoff berth, is the fact that both the Seahawks and the Giants lost. The Giants, somewhat expectedly so, playing a very good Eagles team. But the Seahawks, certainly not expectedly so, losing to the Carolina Panthers, which was a pretty big upset. So that actually gave Green Bay a bit more life with having both those teams lose, and it kept some possibilities alive. Again, Green Bay couldn't have been eliminated. There's nothing that could have given them like all of a sudden boosting them from like 5% to 20%. But if you were looking for signs of hope, both of those were very good results for the Packers and does keep a very small amount of hope alive if Green Bay were to win out the remainder of the games this season. So I know people freaking out a little bit about Detroit winning over Minnesota. As mentioned, if the Packers win out, they'll get a victory over Detroit. Almost assuredly will finish with the tiebreaker there. So should not have to worry about that too much. It's just finishing out of, again, Giants, Commanders, Packers, and Seahawks, finishing at least in the number 1 or number 2 spot out of those 4 teams. So, and for those of you who are of kind of the same opinion of me of like, hey, that's not going to happen. They're not going to win 4 in a row, etc. It's still worth cheering for these outcomes because even in the event that they do win 4 games, you might as well at least have them get to the playoffs, right? Because you could very much make a strong argument that the very, very, very worst case scenario of everything is that they win 4 in a row and just don't get the help that they need and end up with a 9-8 record and just a hair out of the playoffs, because then they have a way worse draft pick and they're on the outside looking in. That is by far and away the worst case scenario. So if you're, at least having some rooting interest for this, at least cheer for the Packers to get the help that they need. So if they do by chance win the next 4 games, at least they're in the playoffs rather than, just sitting on the side on the outside looking in while having a much worse draft pick. So they got some good news with the Giants and Seahawks losing, keeping their very slim playoff hopes alive and still giving them an avenue should they win the remaining 4 games. On the other side of things, Aaron Rodgers, of course, has his best day as a pro, not a monster day by any stretch of the imagination. 4 catches, 57 yards and a touchdown, 1 rush, 3 yards, but the Texans give him a legitimate opportunity at wide receiver, and for the most part, he made the most of it. Really nice touchdown reception, had another nice reception down the field, so a 4 for 57, 1 touchdown day for Amari, and like I said, his best day in the NFL, and better than any day he had in his 1.5 years plus with the Packers. They didn't use him as a returner, they used him as a receiver. Whether or not Green Bay maybe gave up a little bit too early remains to be seen. That's not a great sign if you think maybe they did, but I don't know. It was very clear it was time to move on, and this is an impossible discussion to have because there's a real opportunity that he just needed a change of scenery, that it was just never going to work in Green Bay. And I'm very huge on, I think players need to get off to a strong start. And I thought Amari just had one of the worst starts possible. You draft him, you get him in Green Bay, and then you immediately trade for Randall Cobb. You give him that slot position. He never really got ingrained in slot this past offseason. They start using him as a running back a little bit in preseason. That nothing really ever amounts out of that. They use him primarily as a returner. He just didn't have the skills as a returner. And then he never really got any real opportunity at wide receiver after that. And it just seemed like Aaron Rodgers also never really had much trust in him. So they could have kept him around for the next 3 years and maybe never saw a 4-catch, 57-yard, 1-touchdown performance from Amari. It just could have been the case. He just needed a change of scenery, and he gets it and he makes the most of it in Houston. Maybe this is the best performance he has in his career and he never does anything like this again. Maybe this becomes something consistent for Amari. Either way, it's tough to say if the Packers made a wrong decision because, like I said, he very well could have just needed a change of scenery, and certainly wish him the best of luck. I hope he does well in Houston. Nice to see him have a good day, but a little bit of a kick in the groin after you give him a year and a half. I know he didn't have the opportunity really at wide receiver, but he certainly had opportunities. Didn't do anything with them in Green Bay, and then gets his opportunity in Houston and immediately has a really nice day. But neither here nor there. He's a Houston Texan now. This is a Packers podcast, so we will move on to bigger and better things, which leads us to the one and only Jordan Love, the quarterback who there has been a million different topics on from the moment he was drafted up until today. And it's probably only going to get louder this offseason because this offseason represents a major tilting point in the Packers organization with what they do with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers. Maybe it's much ado about nothing. I'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. Or maybe it is a massive decision. But Jason Wilde had an opportunity to talk to Jordan Love. This is via ESPN Milwaukee. He was on the Homer and Tony show. And this is what Jason had said. Quote, "I had a really great conversation with Jordan on Friday afternoon. I think he very clearly, even though he wouldn't flat out say it, he does not want to sit for another year. So if we get to year 4, which would be this coming season, and Rodgers does come back, I am fairly confident that he will seek a trade." Mark Tauscher on Twitter made mention of this a couple weeks back as well of, hey, this is going to be year 4 for Jordan Love. He's not getting any younger. He was a first-round pick. Is he really going to want to sit back and watch Aaron Rodgers for another season in 2023? Which probably not, right? And now what Jason is saying, and he apparently is going to have an article coming out early this week, which I'm sure is going to be a must-read as well. So make sure to check that out. But detailing his conversation with Jordan, and if this is the case, if he is legitimately seeking to be a starter next year, and Aaron Rodgers is coming back, and the Packers are full bore ahead with Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback, then this represents a very major decision for the Green Bay Packers and for Jordan Love and everyone involved in this conversation. And we've already had the whispers from Aaron Rodgers of, hey, it needs to be mutual. And Gutekunst and LaFleur came out aggressively and said, of course they want Aaron Rodgers back. We want all of our guys back, etc. So either way, this is going to be very, very interesting. So let's talk about Jordan Love first of all and why this makes sense for Jordan. You're a first-round pick. You're a highly touted prospect. Maybe he was a little bit overdrafted, but I think if Green Bay doesn't select him, my guess is he goes by end of round 1, at worst case scenario, early round 2. But I think he probably gets selected by end of round 1. So either way, he's a top 40 quarterback prospect in that draft, or a top 40 prospect in that draft that happens to be a quarterback. And he is now entering the 4th year of his career without really seeing any legitimate playing time. And if Aaron Rodgers comes back, without knowing what his future lies in Green Bay or as a starter. Not only would, Aaron be coming back and he be in his 4th year, he doesn't even have an opportunity to compete for a starting job in Green Bay. It's just Aaron's job. It's not like they're going to bring Aaron back and say, hey, Aaron, we're going to bring you back, but you have to compete with Jordan for the starting spot. That's not the scenario. If Aaron's back, he's the starter, case closed, end of story. And you don't know if Aaron is going to be back in year 5 either, in 2024, which really clouds things for Jordan, because even if Green Bay picks up his 5th year option, and sits him on the bench, which isn't going to happen. They can't pay Rodgers and Love in that 5th year in 2024. But even if that were the case, now you're a free agent after 5 years in the NFL and you've basically not played any snaps. You can't do that if you're Jordan Love. You clearly want an opportunity to go out and compete to show that you are one of the best 32 throwers of the football in the NFL. And it's not saying that he has to immediately win the job, right? It's not saying like, hey, I'm only going to a place that I can start. But if you're Jordan Love, you certainly at least at bare minimum, want to be given the opportunity to compete for that starting spot. And if there is a team that would be interested in just saying, hey, we want Jordan to be our starter, then what choice do you have at that point? Do you want to be a backup quarterback in Green Bay? Or do you want to go and be a starter for a team that wants you to be a starter? Now, if that's the case, remains to be seen. But there will be multiple teams that are potentially looking for starting quarterbacks this offseason. This is probably a limited list. The Jets, like Zach Wilson, nowhere near showing he could be the answer this past season. The Texans will be looking for a quarterback. The Colts, maybe the Raiders. Wouldn't that be just a crazy scenario if the Raiders end up trading for Jordan Love and it's Love and Devontae instead of Carr and Devontae? But I digress. The Commanders, maybe it's Sam Howell. Maybe they stick with Heineke. I don't think so. I think they're going to be looking for some competition at minimum at their quarterback spot. Maybe the Lions are looking for something with Jared Goff, although I doubt Green Bay would trade Jordan Love in the division. The Falcons, I know they drafted Ritter, but maybe they want some competition there. The Panthers, I know they drafted Corral, but probably wouldn't mind some competition there either. The Saints have no young quarterback to potentially compete for that job moving forward. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what happens with Brady? There's already whispers that he may not be back in Tampa, either via retirement or moving to another team. They don't really have a long-term option there at quarterback. That could be an option. And there's other, if Ravens, what happens with Tyler Huntley and more obviously Lamar Jackson this offseason could open up spots there. And there are multiple other teams that, depending on what happens, Geno Smith's a free agent in Seattle. Seattle could need a quarterback. There are a ton of possibilities, but at the end of the day, whatever happens with the crazy quarterback carousel that's going to happen this offseason, Jordan Love is going to at least want to be involved in that conversation and say, hey, is there a situation, if I can go to Carolina and I just have to compete with Matt Corral, give me that chance. That's a better opportunity for me rather than going to Green Bay and just knowing I'm going to be the backup for the Packers. Or if I have to go to the Jets and compete with Zach Wilson, so be it. I'll go and compete with Zach Wilson. That sounds way better than having no opportunity for a starting job in Green Bay. So that's the reason that this could make a lot of sense for Jordan Love and why he wouldn't want to stick around in Green Bay. And if there weren't all this ambiguity with Aaron Rodgers, maybe this would be easier for Jordan Love to swallow, right? If Aaron Rodgers came back and said, I'm coming back in 2024 or 2023, but 2023 is going to be my last year, I'm retiring after that, then that makes Green Bay's decision rather easy, right? They're telling Jordan Love, hey, you're going to be the starter in 2024. We're going to pick up your option in 2024. We plan on you being the guy. Just stick with us one more year, and then you have the keys to the car. You're going to be the franchise quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. That makes things easy, but with this constant ambiguity with Aaron Rodgers, it makes things very, very difficult. And there's nothing to say even that Rodgers might not play into 2025 or 2026. You simply don't know. And if you're Jordan Love, you don't want your career, basically, cut out from under you by the circumstances in front of you at the same position and due to no fault of Jordan Love. So I would totally understand if Jordan Love wanted to look elsewhere to try to find a starting quarterback spot. Now, complicating this a little bit is that the 33rd Team, which is a website that covers the NFL, has a lot of former GMs and analysts and coaches, etc. They have 9 quarterbacks in their early top 100 draft list this year, their top 100 prospects this year. So 9 quarterbacks. So that could muddy the waters of what Jordan Love might have an option for. And teams may want to go into the draft first and say, hey, there's 9 guys in the top 100 in this draft. We want to see what we can get out of the draft rather than trading for a Jordan Love. And then maybe at the end of the draft, if we didn't get the quarterback that we wanted, or we didn't get one of those 9, maybe then we'll take a look at taking a swing at Jordan Love. But Green Bay, if they're going to trade him, probably wants a draft pick in this draft. So that could very much cloud this decision as well. And teams might just not be as willing to give any sort of premium draft pick for Jordan Love when there are so many quarterbacks. It doesn't necessarily change the fact that Jordan Love's going to want to compete for a starting job, because as we've seen with almost every quarterback that was drafted in the first round, or even just drafted period this past year, none of them were given the keys right away. They all had to compete for it, with Kenny Pickett really being the one that eventually earned it after Mitch Trubisky got the start to start the season. So none of those quarterbacks in this past draft immediately were given the opportunity to start, and they all had to compete for it. So it could still be something where he gets an opportunity to compete with one of those guys. But again, teams may be a little less willing to give Green Bay some real nice draft capital because of how many quarterbacks could potentially go in the top 100 in this year's draft. Which brings the conversation to, well, what about the Packers? Why would the Packers want to do this? So the first question there would be, can they just keep him? And the answer is yes. But if Jordan Love is asking out and potentially doing like a hold-in where he's not going to practice and not going to do anything and sort of be, I say malcontent, but I don't say it in a derogatory or negative way towards Jordan Love. Like that's what he would have to do in that situation to sort of force his way for an opportunity somewhere else. If that's going to happen, do you really want drama surrounding your backup quarterback, a guy that's not even going to be playing on the team? At that point, it's probably better just to move in a different direction and see what you can get in exchange for him. So yeah, you could keep him. He's under contract. He doesn't have a ton of leverage, but man, that seems like a lot of headache and drama surrounding your backup quarterback who's probably not even going to play, assuming that Aaron Rodgers is back. And it should go without saying, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back and he just retires, that makes things certainly a lot clearer for Jordan Love, and then he just stays in Green Bay, probably as the starter. Maybe Green Bay gets involved with one of those 9 top 100 picks just to bring in somebody kind of like they did with Brian Brom for Aaron Rodgers. But that makes the decision easy. But if not, then you have a very difficult decision to make, because again, do you really want an unhappy backup quarterback? At that point, it's probably just smarter to move on. So let's just role play this out and say, all right, what could maybe Green Bay get in exchange for Jordan Love? And I'll just say it's nearly impossible to say. Judging value for a quarterback who was a first round pick 3 years ago, didn't do anything in his COVID year, got a start and then a half a game against the Lions at the end of the year in his second year, did not look good, looked pretty darn good in preseason in year 3, and then comes in for 10 snaps so far, 9 throws, and looks pretty darn good in those snaps, earning praise from Darius Slay in that game against the Eagles, and he's got his teammates saying that he looks like a starter in practice every day. So there's some good buzz surrounding Jordan Love, but if you're a team for another franchise, knowing that you're going to try to, make a move at quarterback that could define you as a general manager or your franchise a little bit, you're potentially thinking of trading or spending picks on acquiring a player like that. Don't you want just like a little bit more certainty for a player like Jordan Love? Then Jordan Love, like that's a bold move to take. Now, Ron Wolf did it with Brett Favre, right? He stuck to his gumption of what he thought when he evaluated him as a scout, kept his eyes on him, even though he looked terrible in the preseason for the Falcons and didn't do anything. And like he was going out getting drunk every night. Like Ron Wolf stuck with his intuition, made the trade, first round pick for Brett Favre, and it worked out amazing. You don't necessarily see GMs, operating that same way because job security is just very, very limited in today's day and age. So, it could very much limit what teams are willing to give up because they just don't have enough on him to make a real educated decision. And it doesn't look great if Green Bay is willing to trade him too, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Green Bay felt really good that Jordan Love could be their long-term starting quarterback, of course, a million times over, they take the bounty of everything that the Denver Broncos were willing to give them in exchange for Aaron Rodgers. All the picks, a backup quarterback in Drew Lock who could maybe compete, a really nice rotational defender in Shelby Harris, the Noah Fant at tight end, like that would have been phenomenal. And if you think Jordan Love is a top 15-ish a top 18-ish starting quarterback in the NFL, you got to pull the trigger on that. There's no question about it. So the fact that Green Bay didn't do that and stuck with Rodgers would lead me as a GM to be like, all right, they didn't believe in him then. And if they're now willing to trade him again this offseason, even though there's some pressure from Love, in with Rodgers maybe a year closer to retirement, once again, I'm like, all right, this team that's spent over a first round pick. Remember, they traded up in the first round and has kept him around for 3 years. They don't believe in the guy. Why should I, as a GM, believe in him? So it's going to very much limit what they could get. It's probably not enough. No matter what it is, it's probably not enough to really pique the Packers' interest because, again, they spent, a first and a fourth, basically, on Jordan Love to move up in the first round to get him. They're not getting that back in return. I can tell you that right now. I would think, major best case scenario would be a second round pick. And I think it's probably closer to a third. I go back a little bit. If you're looking for a deal that kind of is apples to apples, but not really, I kind of go back to DeShone Kizer a little bit. A top second round pick, right? Pick 34-ish, somewhere in there, 35, 36, somewhere in that range. So not too different from where Jordan Love was taken. The difference, of course, is that Kizer had a full year in Cleveland, but that was the worst Browns team ever. They were awful, and he didn't really have much to work with. Green Bay trusted their evaluation from the draft. They shouldn't have, but they trusted their evaluation from the draft. They trade Demarius Randall. There were some swaps of 4th and 5th round picks as well, but basically give up a former first round pick to get DeShone Kizer, who is kind of at least close enough to a first round pick, right? So it was kind of more of a player swap. So you kind of look at it, some teams that would maybe make sense. I look at the Indianapolis Colts, probably not a team that's going to end up with a top pick in the draft. Moving on from Matt Ryan, don't have a young quarterback. All right, so what type of player could you get in exchange? Maybe, and this is going to be somewhat ironic because of the player who the Packers could have taken at the time that would have made a lot of sense, but a Jordan Love for Michael Pittman trade could really make some sense. Would the Colts probably want to give up Michael Pittman? No. Is he this phenomenal receiver? No. It would sting to give him up, but if they don't have a ton of other options at quarterback, Michael Pittman's a player that you want to keep on your team, but it's not gonna stop you from making a move that you think can help your franchise, right? If they were a believer in Jordan Love, you give Michael Pittman to Green Bay, you give Jordan Love to Indy, salaries kind of match, it kind of makes some sense, right? Indy's in desperate need of a young, talented quarterback. Green Bay will certainly take another wide receiver for Aaron Rodgers next year. Heck, give me Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, and Michael Pittman. Samori Toure is my number 4. Sign me the heck up. That sounds great, right? If you're Green Bay, you don't lose, it doesn't look as bad, right? Because if you just trade for a pick, you moved a 1st and a 4th up to get Jordan Love, you get a 3rd rounder, pick in exchange or something like that. It doesn't look very good. But if you get just a player in return, like a Michael Pittman, all right, that doesn't look so bad. I don't think any Packer fans are going to be super disgusted by the fact of oh, they got Michael Pittman. I'm pissed off about that. No, that's not going to happen, right? People are going to be pretty happy that they got this pretty good wide receiver. Now, maybe Green Bay has to throw in some picks. Maybe Indy, I don't know. Those would be the starting parameters of a deal, right? Same thing, Colts, a Jelani Woods, right? 3rd round pick a season ago. Only played about 200 snaps, but he's got some touchdowns. He's a red zone threat. He's a solid blocker. Was a huge, athletic freak coming out of college. Indy probably has to add some late round picks on top of that trade, and I'm sure they don't want to give up Woods either, but they've got 2 other tight ends, including Mo Alley Cox, under contract. So it's not like they'd be, bare in the cupboard. And again, you don't not move on from Jelani Woods if you have a chance to grab a quarterback who could be your starter. So, probably be Woods and some picks for Jordan Love. But, I could see the Colts as a potential trade partner that could legitimately make some sense between the Packers and the Colts. And there's some trades there, at least some parameters that maybe you could start off with. So those would be the type of deals that I would probably look at if I were Green Bay, if they did, in fact, decide to maybe try to make a move there. So it's worth then looking at what the Packers have been saying. So Brian Gutekunst, as mentioned earlier, we want to keep all of our guys. We want to keep Aaron. This was not a 1-year contract. This was a long-term commitment. Okay, check. Matt LaFleur, immediately, yes, obviously we want to keep him back. Definitely, you used all the superlatives that you would want to hear. So they immediately, in their press conferences right after Rodgers said the words, mutual interest, they, go all in and double down. I just don't know that means anything. Because what can they possibly say in that situation? I know I've mentioned this on here before, but it's not like if even they said we're just going to wait until the offseason to make those decisions, it would be DEFCON 1,000,000 in Green Bay. I don't know if high or low is DEFCON is better or whatever. DEFCON 1, DEFCON 1,000,000, whatever's worse. not a military guy. My apologies. I'll stick to Packers and podcasting and not military stuff. But it would be bells and whistles, nightmares. Like, it would be everything. Like, it would cause chaos in Green Bay. With Rodgers would be on McAfee. Who the heck knows, right? So even if they say, like, we're just going to make all those decisions in the offseason, like, that would raise alarm bells for Rodgers and company, I'm sure. And it would be not taking care of the people and need a better line of communication. So they can't say that. And they certainly can't say, yeah, we're going to, potentially look at what options are out there in the offseason, or, well, we want to see what Aaron does first, or, if they say anything like that, it's going to cause drama and issues and all of it, right? So the only thing that they can say in that situation is, yes, we're all in. Aaron. It's going to be all about Aaron. Aaron's our quarterback, etc. That's all they can say in that situation. So, and they're probably telling the truth. Maybe they're not, but I don't think that they can say anything different. And I do think at minimum, they have to really play out the scenario that's at hand here with Jordan Love. So let's look at what this Packers decision actually is. They have to pick up Jordan Love's fifth year. They have to make a decision on Jordan Love's fifth-year option. That complicates things quite a bit because that is an exorbitant deal in 2024 if they want to go in that direction. That becomes fully guaranteed. So that is the first decision that they're going to have to make. But in addition, they also have to kind of weigh here of like, all right, what's the status of our team right now? Right now we're 5-8, and they'll know by the end of this year if it's a 5-12 team or a 9-8 team or something in the middle. Probably something in the middle. Probably like what, a 7-10 team, something like that. We're a 7-10 team, and this team's probably not going to get better from a talent standpoint in the immediate future. Aaron, I know he was banged up, but he showed some legitimate signs of decline. And at best case, you probably get 2 more years of that. And even if Aaron plays at an MVP level, can we put the players around him needed to make a legitimate Super Bowl run? I'm not sure. And if that's the case, don't you just have to say, hey, we would rather take a look at Jordan Love for those 2 years and see if he can be a legitimate long-term quarterback for us? Because it's probably 1 or 2 years of Rodgers at best. And that's the upside, right? Now, if it's one or 2 years of Rodgers and you legitimately think that in those 1 to 2 years you can make a real serious run at the Super Bowl, then I understand taking that chance. I really do. But you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. If it's 1 to 2 years of Rodgers and you legitimately think that it's like a 2% chance maybe at best that you can win a Super Bowl one of those years, I don't know. Like, at that point, it's probably better to take your shot at Love, see if he can be the long-term answer. And if not, you're at least closer to making that decision and moving in the next direction with whoever your next starting quarterback's going to be. Probably being a little bit worse in the interim, probably getting some better draft picks, maybe getting closer to finding your future franchise quarterback, or it just ends up being Jordan Love. So that's a decision you have to make too, because this isn't like, all right, this is going to be like 5 or 6 years of Aaron Rodgers. It could be 5. We're seeing what's happening with Tom Brady. He just won a Super Bowl very recently. Quarterbacks are playing longer now, so it could be longer, but you're probably looking at this as 1 or 2 more years of Rodgers, or a potential look at a long-term, solution with Jordan Love, for lack of a better term. So this is a very major decision that Green Bay is going to have to, kind of to just make and weigh out and figure out what is the best ROI moving forward. And it's worth noting here as well that if we're being totally honest, the worst case scenario, the worst thing that could happen, the absolute worst thing that could happen is that they trade Jordan Love and he becomes a top 10 quarterback somewhere. That is the nightmare scenario. Because if you took a year more of Aaron Rodgers and the cost of that was trading a future top 10 quarterback for like a 3rd round pick or for like a backup tight end, that's not going to go over very well, right? So that is by far and away the worst case scenario. And there's nothing to say that that's going to be the case. It's more likely that you trade him away and he's like the 25th best quarterback, which is like, I don't know, fine, whatever. Those don't grow on trees either, but you're not going to lose much sleep over it. So this is why it's such an interesting decision. It's important for them to get this decision right. If they, you could look at the downside the other, way, right? In that if they stick with Love, they say, hey, we're going to move forward with Jordan Love. And Rodgers says, okay, trade me, which the contract becomes an absolute nightmare. But let's say they figure out a way to trade Rodgers and they get something in return for him, and Rodgers goes and wins a Super Bowl with another team. That stings a lot as well. But it's tough to say, like, would Green Bay have been able to put the same team around him to do the same thing in Green Bay? Did you really lose a Super Bowl? Or did you just lose the quarterback that could have won you a Super Bowl, but you didn't have the right team around him anyway to capitalize on it? So you took your chance with the younger quarterback. To me, that stings, but it stings less than if you were to give up on Love and he becomes a top 10 quarterback. So if you're looking at it that way, the decision is probably Love, but there's no easy way to look at that. And it should be noted as well, maybe the Packers just know. Maybe Love's just not that good. That's a possibility. But this is why I think that it's so important that Green Bay gets a look at Jordan Love over the remainder of the season. I know they can't do it now because they're still mathematically able to make the playoffs, and they're going to be probably going into Miami as well. But it just really, really puts them behind the 8 ball to try to make this decision when they never really got a great look at Jordan Love. And this brings us back a little bit to the Amari Rodgers decision, which is nowhere near the same, but sometimes you don't really get a great look at what a player can do. He never got one of those 50 snap games at wide receiver, at least a 4-game stretch where he got to prove what he could do at wide receiver. You release him, he goes to another team, he gets that opportunity, and at least in early results are good for that other team. And you don't want that to happen with Jordan Love. Like I said, the worst thing that could happen is that you trade him to another team, he becomes awesome. Like, that would be brutal. That would be an incredibly tough pill to swallow. So maybe Love is just bad, and maybe they move on, and maybe they're willing to take what they can get. Maybe they get a look at him and they realize, hey, this is the guy we want to move forward with. Certainly sounds like players on the Packers think he can be a starter in this league. He's shown signs in very limited opportunities in preseason and the 10 snaps he's got in the regular season so far. But man, it would be really nice to get a look at him the remainder of the season to help you make that decision, because as much as you've seen him in practice, as much as you've seen him grow as a player, until you get out there and the bullets are live and you have to really be the quarterback for the team and face the media every week and face your teammates every week, and you're the face of the franchise, you don't know. Some players are going to rise to that occasion and be better even than they showed that they were ever in practice. And some are going to shrink and be even worse than they ever showed in practice. So that's why it'd be so nice to get to see a little bit more of Jordan Love this season. And again, I understand why they can't do it right now, but man, it would be really nice to see it so that they can have more information on how to make that decision, so that you don't hopefully end up with that worst case scenario where he gets traded to another team and just balls out. Either way, this is going to be a franchise-altering decision for the Packers. And there's if you do the decision-making matrix, right, maybe Love and Rodgers are both great and they have to give one of them away. Maybe Rodgers is great and Love is terrible and it's not that big of a deal. Maybe Love is great and Rodgers is terrible. I don't think that's probably going to be it. Or maybe they're both terrible. I don't think that's going to be it. But you've got to get this decision right, because this is the quarterback position for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers' time is winding down one way or the other. Jordan Love's is just starting. If you think there's even a chance that he can be that guy for your franchise, that he could be a top 15 quarterback with just a little bit more experience and a little bit more nurturing, to me, you've got to take that chance. And like I said, if this was a Packers team that was set up to win Super Bowls these next 2 years with just Aaron Rodgers coming back and playing quarterback, by all means, you take that chance every time. I just don't see a franchise right now that's set up for that opportunity. I don't think they have the opportunity in free agency to get massively better in a very short period of time. They're not going to have the money to do so. They're going to lose more players than they can gain. And they're going to be very dependent upon improving this team by probably making some coaching changes and bringing in draft picks. And that's probably not going to be enough to get them over the top. Could it be? I don't know, maybe. But this is why, again, it's such a very difficult decision. And if they think Love can be the guy, even just there's a real chance of it, to me, you just got to go in that direction. No idea what they're going to do. Maybe Rodgers makes the decision easy and maybe he just retires. Maybe the Packers, again, don't believe in Love at all and they just trade him and get whatever they can in return and are like, fine, we're good with that. And they take, maybe again, they're one of the teams that are trying to take one of those top 100 quarterbacks in the draft and start that process over, have Rodgers play for 2 more years and then hope that next guy is ready in 3 years. they could go that direction as well. So either way, a massive pivot point for this franchise moving forward at the quarterback position. My guess, they probably stick with Rodgers and move on from Love, but by no way is that a 100% guarantee. And that's why this offseason is just going to be a very crazy, buckle up, get ready, because there are going to be some monumental decisions for this franchise this offseason, including, deciding between your Hall of Fame franchise quarterback and Jordan Love. So we'll see what happens. Should be interesting. I'll be right here to cover it 365 days a year, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.